The following is a conversation with José Velez.
I'm the founder and CEO of detech.ai, and I'm based in Almada, in Portugal. That's basically across the river from Lisbon.
detech.ai, specialized in reliability intelligence. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. I didn't at the start of the show either. But throughout the course of the interview, we dive into what those topics are, what that means, and how they're applied to companies. We also dive into talking points around early phase startups as well, such as the pain points of starting a company, when you should start focusing on DevOps and when that moment specifically comes in the life cycle, insights into launching an MVP from a technical standpoint and from a non-technical standpoint. We also asked Jose what he would do differently if he was starting the company today, and we talk a little bit about product discovery and customer discovery separately.
This episode is sponsored by Codesphere. For more information on what Codesphere is, you can click on the link. But I want to just get you all ready for the up-and-coming Codesphere startup program, which we are very soon launching in the coming weeks. You can apply if you're a founder out there. If you have a startup, you can apply for our startup program. You'll get free credits to use on the Codesphere platform, up to $100,000 worth of credits you can use. You'll also get access to our founders community. We have a Slack channel, a Slack community there that you can be involved in, as well as some content, fast lane support for when you are using our product, some real product and startup tips and advice. As you know, the Startup Architects is all about how to build a successful startup. So the startup program, there'll be links in the following descriptions, in the following episodes in the descriptions, and just find our social media. You'll find it sooner or later, and apply now, and I'll see you on the other side of that.
Hear a lot of startups in Lisbon, but not in Almada.
to be honest, I actually live in Almada, so that's why I'm in Almada. But the company is actually incorporated in Delaware.
Ah, okay.
So is Codesphere, yes. Delaware.
That's a hot spot.
You say across the road from Lisbon, that's across that really, really long bridge.
Yeah, so like the one that's similar to Golden Gate Bridge.
Yes, the Lisbon Golden Gate Bridge, yes. Have you seen
Exactly.
it?
No, I haven't actually.
Monstrously long. It's very cool.
Is it?
Yes.
You need to visit Portugal. Absolutely.
Yeah, we will.
The next podcast we'll do in person.
Yeah,
we will. Next time we'll come to Web Summit and we'll do it in person there in the busiest room. Oof.
I think it's November. At least last year it was in November. I'm not sure about these years.
Yeah, we should definitely go. I'm a bit of a nerd about tech, hardware, and I really want to get some roving mics. There's little on-spot mics with the really sweet little SD card readers. You just walk around and record stuff. It'd be awesome.
I imagine the sound quality would be awful.
The sound quality is actually very good.
It's November 1st to the 4th, so I want to see that.
You need to get one of those then.
Yes. All right, so tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Okay, awesome. So me personally, I'm the founder and CEO of detech.ai, and at detech.ai, we are on a mission to deliver reliability intelligence to cloud-native companies in order to help them deliver incredible user experiences to their users and prevent customer-facing issues before they occur. And we're basically doing this by productizing industry-leading site reliability engineering practices, starting by the backbone of the reliability stack, which are the service level objectives. And these are kind of like a set of practices that Google initially created to run software in production, and then they started being adopted by some of the tech leaders in the industry, Spotify, Netflix, all of those. And now what we're trying to do is democratize those practices to companies of any size.
I went to your website and you mentioned reliability intelligence a lot. Can you explain that concept to me?
Absolutely. So reliability intelligence is when you track reliability indicators against your business goals and you make them easy and digestible to be discussed by anyone in the company. For example, tracking latency or the response time on your sign-up flow against what your business considers to be acceptable in order to actually increase conversions or activations is kind of like a black box for everyone that's outside DevOps or SRE. But in reality, product managers need to know and need to define with the engineering teams what is acceptable for them to delight their customers. And what we're doing is transforming the monitoring and observability data into these actionable indicators that companies can use to make decisions, alert their on-call engineers based on customer impact, not on low-level issues that then are really hard to prioritize and understand if they're a problem or not. And when you do this at scale, you actually have great data to look at performance and for decision making company wide.
So is that like, I guess a kind of famous, in inverted commas, example would be like the time that it takes to click to purchase. So if you click buy, it's like the how important that like load time is or whatever. That's like is it the little things like that through the website that kind of make the difference?
100%. To be honest, people actually might think that those are different, but like there are actually studies that if, for example, you click on something that's interactive and it takes more than 100 milliseconds to do something, people think of it as slow and they don't like the experience that they have.
Right,
And it's really hard when you've got, for example, thousands of users to measure every single one of them. And then, for example, if 30 did not have this experience, what do you do? It's really hard. And there's a lot of data science associated into like actually logging the experience of each individual user and then visualizing everything as a whole and making decisions around where you need to improve your performance and reliability.
I mean, that's like a big that's a big switch as well on the web in general, isn't it? Because Google's like changed their whole way of listing websites based on page load speed and their Lighthouse thing and all that stuff. So is that kind of feed into what you guys are doing as well? Is that like a big motivator for improvements?
To be honest, that's a really good point, Tim. In our case, we're actually targeting our ideal customer profile are actually companies with really complex and much more technical architectures. But what you described is exactly spot on. So actually, if you don't have decent load page times, Google actually puts you below on the list for the SEO. But we're actually targeting companies that have like distributed services architecture and that have got a harder time in assuring reliability just as the first early adopters of our product, just because they need our product much more and it's much more difficult to assure the reliability than of websites.
Yeah, because once you get past that surface level of like this website has got a slow load time, and then you're like, well, how is it doing it? How do we speed this call up? Like the query parameters of that stuff. It's like that is really crunching through a lot of technical questions.
True.
Yeah, wow.
Do you think a lot of startups are implementing reliability intelligence right now? Do you think it's a very common practice, or do you still think it's a usually overlooked practice?
So that's also a great question then. But to be honest, most companies don't have reliability intelligence. Like if you're talking about companies like Google, Slack, like those really strong, those companies that have really strong engineering cultures, they're starting. Google created it, but the top tier companies are starting to implement reliability intelligence, but it's not their core business. So they're struggling a lot, and these are really complicated and complex issues. But then the rest of the companies that don't have thousands of engineers, they're not. And they're basically dealing with a lot of different issues while running their software in production. And they have no way about actually making data-driven decisions on top of their monitoring and observability data.
Right.
They just have huge amounts of data, and it's really hard to do anything with it.
That's interesting that you mentioned about strong engineering culture is the thing that pushes that forward, because we were talking last week a little bit about like what motivates a product team, and it's interesting that one of the points we discussed in during that episode was that this whole kind of engineering culture can be a key driver for product teams. So it sounds like in this example, or like the reason why this is important to this reliability and intelligence, from a technical point of view, from a technically driven team, this is like a no-brainer. It makes a lot of sense. But how would you then motivate other product teams to kind of adopt this, and how would you like inspire maybe not so technically minded teams to dive into these topics?
Okay, that's another really interesting question. The reality is that there needs to be a huge cultural shift for the product teams to actually have incentives to care about reliability. And most companies don't do it. Even Google, they only started doing that shift where product teams also care about reliability because it has an impact on user engagement, churn, activation rates, and they realize that it has a huge impact, and reliability is actually a feature of the product, and it was really hard. And how they did it is basically by keeping incentives for the product teams in order to define these service level objectives that are kind of like the reliability goals with the engineering teams. And basically then they've got kind of like a common indicator, a common KPI for both teams to discuss, measure, and iterate on reliability.
And what kind of a KPI would that be? Is it like getting load time down, or is it the decreasing the amount of report bugs or user complaints? How do you kind of measure if people are happy? Because usually people only complain when they're unhappy, right? So
Exactly. So basically, the way to do it is, I mean, it's not the way to do it, it's the way that Google does it, and the way that we're productizing is to kind of like measure and define what is a good event for a user, and that needs to be the product team to define. So how would a user experience this, for example, sign up user journey successfully? And to give you a concrete example, let's say that a user is trying to authenticate with a login. So they want all of the users to, when they click on the authenticate button, to be redirected to the other page within, for example, 200 milliseconds. And then the way that this does is you get like an indicator with the percentage of users that experience this journey successfully. So, for example, 99.9% of users signed up within 200 milliseconds. And then it was 0.01% that didn't. And then you can make decisions if you're losing customers and you need to improve the reliability, for example, to 5 nines latency and availability instead of just 3. And then the business and the product teams needs to make these decisions.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. You just got someone standing there with a stopwatch, figuring out how fast, faster and faster.
Do it again. Didn't quite catch it.
Yeah, that's how they measure it at Google.
Yeah, they just stand there with on his wristwatch. Go.
200 milliseconds. I think about 0 seconds.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
So many interesting jumping off points there, because I guess with an early phase company as well, a lot of it is because you're following maybe more of a mission or a drive of like the goal of the company. Like we're gonna build this thing. We haven't got to the point where we're going to start taking it apart and making it and iterating and making it better. So 0.1% change isn't going to isn't going to move the needle that much at an early phase. But you can see that if the culture is there from the beginning, that then further down the line, because you're only talking a year or so. Then as soon as it's kind of like, if it's already in the machine, it makes all the difference.
100%. A major problem that companies face is that they think about reliability the same way that they think about cybersecurity. They only care about it until it's too late, until they've had a major cyber attack, a major outage. They lost a lot of customers, and suddenly they realize that they lost a lot of customers, they damaged their brand's reputation, they lost money, and then, okay, now we need to start investing in reliability. But then it's already too late, and it would be much easier if they started from the beginning and lay the foundations while it was still an early product.
Do you think that this is actually you're probably the wrong person to ask this question to, but do you think that it's like it's made more important than it is on large scale? So for example, with Facebook, they had that huge outage and famously 70 million people signed up for Telegram in that few hours that the messenger was out. Do you think that people should be more forgiving of these kind of reliability issues, or do you think that it's it is as important as that? Like you're out for a few hours, you lose 70 million customers. Do you think that's the level that it's at?
So the truth is that for those kinds of companies, users actually have much more or much higher expectations from them. But in reality, it's much, much, much more complex to keep everything running reliably. So at the same time, me knowing what's on the other side, I think users should be forgiving, but in reality, they're not. So these companies need to focus a lot on reliability, otherwise they're going to lose customers. It's like, it's unfair, but it's the reality. And from the trend that has happened throughout the last few years, customer expectations have only been going up. So I believe that they will continue to go up.
Okay, that's super interesting. So customers are always expecting more from these areas of speed and performance and actually reliability on a website. Okay.
Absolutely. That's why companies can actually use reliability as a competitive advantage, because if they provide a better user experience, they're going to grow more via word of mouth, and they're going to delight their customers, and they're going to grow faster.
How early on in the product or platform lifecycle can you implement something like detech.ai?
So in reality, we could implement something from the ground up. So you just launch your first application, and you could actually leverage a lot of benefit from it, because basically everything is set up out of the box. Instead of you having to learn what are the right metrics to monitor, how to set up algorithms to alert you, that end up taking a lot of time from you. And most of companies, even the larger ones, end up doing it not in the right way. And it's not because they don't have the skills for it, it's just because it's a highly technical and complex problem to solve. So they could leverage it from day one. We're just not targeting small companies. We're only targeting companies post Series A, just because that's when they start caring about it.
Okay,
Yeah, that is actually an interesting and alarming point. Yeah.
We've also spoken a few times on previous episodes about community and how important it is to have a community around products. And we spoke to a guest a few weeks ago, Jacob, about his company, Butter, and they have this online workshop platform. And he was saying that they don't have a community around people who are running online workshops. They have a community of people who are teachers, so it's like a kind of an adjacent community. And then hopefully they'll be inspired to use the platform. Is that something that you guys would you advocate for that? Is that something that you kind of are kind of getting into as well as a company?
Okay, off the record, we've actually already created a community, but it's kind of like in a closed beta.
We're on the record. This is literally on the record.
It's a podcast.
You'll never be more on the record today than you are right now.
It's my first time. You need to be
off
patient.
But
but basically, we've already created a community, but we're still just getting like the early customers, some industry leaders that are really passionate about what we're doing, and we're only going to launch this community to the public after we've laid all the foundations. That's, to be honest, it's a work in progress. But we completely believe that having a community around both your product and the area that you're building for, especially in our case when we're kind of like creating a new category, it's super important to be thought leaders, always be writing content to educate the market, so that you always also give value to the people that are buying your products, so that you don't just take. It's more important to give. Actually, it's kind of like through Techstars, that we went through the Techstars New York program, their mantra is always like give first. If you give, you're always going to receive. Not always, but you're more likely to receive, and then you're altruist and you're helping people, and good things will come back to you.
That's exactly right. Yeah, an ecosystem around any product nowadays seems so important. Obviously, we're trying to build one at Codesphere too, but it's almost out of it happened very naturally. Like you need the community can't just be involved in one product and nothing else. There's a whole ecosystem worth of space to move into. So yeah.
But to be honest, I'll probably reach out to you like after this conversation, because I'm still learning a lot about like marketing, community building. So I'll be happy to discuss how you're thinking about it, what you're figuring out that works, what doesn't. That's something that I'm really interested in.
Happy to give. Tim, what you got?
I'm happy to give. Yeah, too. I'm happy to give. After consideration, I'm happy to give.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey with detech.ai then, as opposed to the product. When did you guys launch, or when did you first get off the ground?
Okay, so that's actually a funny story. So I actually started this company straight out of college. I started working during my master's, and then actually the whole idea came from, not the master thesis, but I basically proposed to DP to implement a solution to a critical pain point that they had, that was that they couldn't basically identify the issues in a really complex, one of their most critical applications. And basically I wrote my master thesis at the same time that I designed and implemented that solution. And as soon as I finished building it for DP, I then basically as soon as I was finished with that, I started designing and creating a solution that would work for all of the different companies. And that was our first product. It was an AI ops platform, basically applying artificial intelligence to IT operations. In a nutshell, it's basically leveraging the AI to look at the historical data of monitoring and observability, identifying patterns of things that could go wrong autonomously, and then without having to have anyone configure it, it would alert, okay, there's an anomaly here, you need to look into it. And that's our first product. We got backed by Techstars early last year, so it was February 2021. But then when I actually got into Techstars, Jenny, the managing director, told me, Jose, you need to stop coding. You're the CEO. You need to be selling the product, marketing it, because we just had 3 customers. And that was one of the major mistakes that we did. And when I actually tried to sell the product, I realized that it was a super competitive landscape. It was going to be super crowded because the messaging was all over the place, because Datadog, New Relic, all of the players, even if they were not doing AOps, they were claiming to do it. So we kind of had to do a soft pivot after we actually did some customer and product discovery.
Was it hard for you to switch from coding to CEOing?
I mean, in the beginning, yes, because to be honest, like I couldn't understand like what was a better way of spending my time than actually building the product.
What is the point?
Exactly. It's like if I stop building the product, then it's just my co-founder coding, and we're not going to like be able to launch in time and all of that. But at the same time, like as a technical founder, I was like neglecting the importance of actually talking to customers, trying to sell the product, and actually doing product discovery to actually make sure that you're solving a critical pain point for users and that you can sell it, that you know what is the messaging, what they care about, what are the customer acquisition channels. And that, to be honest, is kind of like a bigger competitive advantage, the go-to-market, than the product itself. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bigger, but it's as important.
What would your advice be to other founders then in the same kind of situation? Well, now you've done it, what would you say? Would you say that it was better that you stopped the coding and started selling, or?
I mean, like, if I were to start like the company like again from start, I would do like 3 major things differently. So the first one is that I would spend a lot more time talking to customers and doing product discovery before actually starting to build a product. And this would have saved me a lot of time and money in actually building a product that wasn't marketable in the long run. Actually making sure that you've got at least problem solution fit is super important, and product market fit, even though you can only validate it much later when you've got actual users, but you need to validate the first instance of it. There's no point in starting to build something before you validated this. The second point is that I wouldn't have started the company straight out of college, you know?
Right.
Even though like the whole young entrepreneur thing is highly glorified, I find it extremely unlikely that someone who hasn't personally experienced the problems that they're solving for, that knows how companies work, especially if they were like a top tier company, so that you learn how they were structured, what works, what doesn't, so that you could be successful in creating a company of your own. And don't get me wrong, like I've learned so much from doing this, and I've grown as a person, as a professional much faster than I believe I would have if I was working at a larger company. But the truth is that I've made many mistakes. I've been forced to work like nonstop in order to make up for the knowledge that I should have already had when I started out the company. And it took me much longer to get to where I am than if I was much more experienced when I started the company.
So that old classic of the difference between knowledge and wisdom, isn't it? Like the knowledge plus experience. But then your brain is just so much more plastic. I mean, neuroplasticity is so much higher when you graduate, so you're so much more in tune with those ideas. So I bet if you'd left it, you probably would have been like, now I see the flaws, now I'm not going to do it, blah blah blah.
True.
So yeah, I see that.
At the same time, there are also advantages. So for example, I was able to work for a lot of time without a salary because I wasn't expecting to
didn't
get
care.
paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't care. The second point is that I was really flexible about what I had to do, because basically, since I didn't have like that much experience in anything, like I was actually able to, okay, now you have to do sales. Okay, I'm going to learn sales. Now you have to do marketing. Okay, I'm going to learn marketing. Now you need to do product management. I'm going to learn product management. And basically, I learned like a bit of everything, and that actually opened my horizons a lot. And I'm really grateful for that, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And as well as these things that you mentioned, like the switching from being a coder to a CEO, or like more applicable kind of like early phase pain points. Was there anything else that you kind of would message, pass on to other CEOs out there or founders, or is there anything that you kind of like desperate to scream out to people and be like, don't do this for crying out loud?
I mean, like early stage companies struggle with a lot of things. So like I could go on forever, but if I had to like pick...
Okay. I've got a lot of problems.
Exactly, it's true. It's true. But like if I had to pick the three most likely pain points, at least in my opinion, of course, that I've seen to be a likely cause for companies to fail, I'd say that it's one, when founders don't spend enough time talking to customers, and then they're building a solution that doesn't solve a critical problem for the users. And to be honest, these are like most companies or most startups. And this is a huge problem. Actually, investors prefer to fund like a company who's already validated that there's a huge problem, a huge market, and that you can find a way to reach your customers. So like a decent go-to-market strategy, then a company who's already created a full product that is already selling it, that's already got revenue. Because to be honest, then you're going to scale it and you're going to lose a lot of money. So like that's the first one, like to actually make sure that you're building a solution that solves a critical problem. And the same thing happens when they take too long building the product without putting it in the hands of the customers. I guess this is especially true for technical founders that think if you build a product, customers will come. This is not true, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's super unlikely that you're going to build the right product the first time around. It's super important to have continuous feedback, have your early adopters tell you what are the problems, experiment with the problems, with the product that you've created, and then iterate based on their feedback. This is one of the most critical things that most companies get wrong. And as soon as we've got it right, things completely shifted. The second is when they try to scale before they're ready. So basically, in the past 2 years, money has been somewhat abundant in the markets, which means that VCs have been kind of like forced to compete between each other for the best deals. And for them to get them, they're actually forced to get earlier than what they're used to. And what ends up happening many times is that as soon as the startups get the money, they start hiring because suddenly they've got like all of this cash, but they haven't laid the foundations necessary to be able to scale successfully. And what I mean by this is that other than what I've mentioned in the first point, is that they haven't identified their ideal customer profile, or in other words, the type of company that would benefit the most from their product or service, or the profile of the buyer for direct to consumer companies. And this is extremely important because you're building different products if you're selling to a large enterprise, for example, or if you're selling to a scale-up. They've got completely different processes, completely different needs, and you cannot build everything. So you need to cater your product to one specific segment in the beginning, of course. And then they haven't created a repeatable sales process. So they start hiring people, but the founders haven't actually tried to sell the product, iterate on the messaging, identify the right customer acquisition channels, and what is the basically buyer or customer journey, and then actually have a playbook that they can use to onboard and coach the new hires. And if they don't do this, basically it's going to be much more difficult, at least, for them to be successful.
It's like a kind of supply lines thing, isn't it? If you're kind of like, if you're forging ahead, but you're not kind of putting the structure in place to then support yourself as you go. But I guess that must be such a hard challenge, because at that early phase, everything's so exciting, and you're kind of like, if you're kind of tearing off in a direction, it must be so difficult to be like, wait, guys, we're going to think about this. Let's make sure that we've got all this stuff in place, because it's probably the last thing you want to. Is it the last thing you want to kind of think about, or is it something that you're kind of glad to do it and make sure that you are supporting yourself?
So that's the thing. So like, I think as the gut instinct, it's the first thing that you want to do. You feel like you need to build everything. You feel like the product is never good enough. You need to basically develop it further before you put it in the hands of the customers. But having experienced the consequences of doing that, now for sure, like that's the last instinct that I have. It's actually the
Okay.
opposite. I'm always thinking, okay, do we really need to build this? Like, it's going to cost us a lot of time and money to build this, and then it's much more difficult to support and build on top of a really complex product with a lot of different offerings. So it's really critical that you only build the most essential things, because otherwise it might feel like you're offering a lot more value, but you're not really. You're offering a much more complex product that is going to be harder to use, and then in consequence it's going to be much harder to develop and scale and to maintain. So it would be like the best products are super simple, super straight to the point, and super easy to use.
There must be a huge tendency to always think that the complexity is more important when you're the person building it and you're the one who's passionate about the technology, because you're just
True.
like, well, if we've got more stuff, then that's better than less.
Exactly.
But yeah, from a user point of view, especially if someone's just starting to use your product, I actually had that experience recently with a mapping app that I haven't used for a long time called City Mapper, and I used it years ago when I was living in London. And it was super clean, just like basically helped you get places faster by adding extra travel points than Google would. So it would say, like, if you want to get here, instead of just getting the train from here to there, you could cycle to this point and then get the train, and that would be faster. Or get a taxi to this train station instead of going all the way in a taxi. Just little hacks for traveling. And it was super awesome. They had like this little joke where you'd scroll down far enough and it would say, get a jetpack. That would be the fastest because it would take you 5 seconds or whatever. And when I visited London last year, I downloaded the app again. I was like, oh, sweet. This is going to be, I like this app. It's going to be a good experience. But they've blown it up so much. And I think a lot of it is because they've had to monetize it. But now it's like unusable with all of these extra features and stuff. And, like adding points of a shop you might want to visit on the way and stuff. And it's just like the basic version it fitted the need perfectly. But I bet behind the scenes, people are like, what about this? Let's build this thing into it, which you just don't need as a user. So yeah, I feel that pain. That's good advice, I guess.
Absolutely. That's a really valid point. And I don't know that city planner app, but first of all, it looks cool. Actually, it's really useful for me to, like, since I've got a jetpack, it would be much easier for them to tell me where I can go with the jetpack,
You should get it because you'd be going everywhere.
Does it work in Lisbon?
Yeah. Is it just a London app, Tim? Or?
Oh no, it's everywhere now. Yeah, actually, after I re-downloaded it, I realized it pinged me and said you can use this in Berlin. I think they've got loads of big cities. There's not like countrywide travel, but city specific. So I think most major cities in Europe they have it. I'm not sure about the US of A.
But how do you draw the line? How do you know when you've got enough features to go to users, and then how do you know when it's like, let's add some more before it's ready? Is it all just user feedback? How do you draw that?
Before you answer as well, actually, something I read recently about the team at Facebook that build React. They famously said recently, we never build features because they're just like, it's more problems, it just causes more problems. Even if people are asking for it, we just never build more features. They just do a release, whenever they do like a version whatever. So True. I guess they're adamantly against it.
But that's a super valid point, Tim. But answering your question, then I guess it's a mix of a lot of things. So first of all, you need to think about the problem that you're solving for, or the job to be done that the user has, and you should focus on the biggest value or the biggest pain point that they have, and kind of like ignore the tiny ones, at least in the beginning, to make sure that you're only focusing on the most relevant thing. And then you need to design the user journeys to make sure that it seamlessly fits the process or the job that they need to do. And then, of course, ideally, you should validate it, both in terms of like when you design the product, validate it with customers to make sure that when they try it, they can seamlessly use it and find and understand what they need to do by themselves. And then, of course, you need to instrument everything and measure to actually see what customers are doing, because one thing is what they tell you, the other thing is what they do. And this actually is like a super relevant thing to be able to balance these two things, like what customers tell you and what you actually build.
This is what This is what Emil was saying to us last week, who's a product specialist. He was saying that there's one element which is just the feedback you're getting from customers saying, "Oh yeah, this is good, this is useful." But then he said that the real gold is where you see actual time in app. You know, when you actually see the people, how much time they're actually spending using those features, which I guess is also very difficult because if you're building new features because people have asked for them, and then they're not even using them, it must be so annoying. You asked for this, but yeah, I don't know.
This is something that companies need to take super close attention, because like I'm not sure if you've heard like that kind of like big outlash to Google Cloud Platform, because they say that their product teams they almost feel like they're annoyed about having users. Like they're saying that, for example, their product teams feel like, oh, we could build such a great product if we didn't have like these pesky users annoying us, asking us to do stuff. And then customers were like complaining that basically they were giving feedback about what they wanted to be improved, but then the product teams were saying, no, you don't know what you're talking about, the data says this. And then users were having an horrible experience because they were just focusing about the data. And then like there was a huge backlash against Google Cloud Platform, and there needs to be a balance between the two.
Yeah. There's also like this branching, snowballing feature effect where if you give someone a feature, they'll expect something else just naturally. So if users ask for like a video call feature and you make that for them, then they're like, oh, there's no audio on this video. So then you have to make audio. And then it's like, oh, the quality is not very good. So you have to improve the quality. So if you answer one, you might end up down this path of answering every request that comes in. So it's a difficult road.
You become a feature factory, and you want to be the furthest away from that. Like Calendly became like $1 billion company with like the simplest of applications.
DocuSign as well. That's the other one. I can't believe the valuation of DocuSign, which is basically load a PDF onto a website and sign it. And it's just all it does. It's just like crazy.
It's weird how hard that is to do elsewhere, you know?
True.
Shout out to DocuSign.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch the topic a little bit, because I think that as well as product and those kind of like first stage teething points and features and stuff, it'd be interesting to get your take on hiring. How big is your team at the moment?
So right now we're 9 people. We're basically me. Our CTO was the director of engineering of a Canadian IT consulting company, a product manager and a product designer. And then we've got 4 engineers and a go-to-market leads.
Okay. And are you looking to scale soon, or is that something that is on the horizon? Yes.
So to be honest, we're currently raising our seed rounds. We've been receiving amazing feedback. And if there are any investors looking or watching or listening to this podcast, feel free to reach out to me. But it's looking.
Feel free to fund us. Yeah.
exactly. But actually, things are going really well. So we actually are expecting to close the round. It's a $3 million round within the next few weeks. And after we raise the round, then we're going to start scaling.
And is that like a daunting prospect for you? Are you excited about growing the team and like growing the team culture and all that kind of stuff?
So like to be honest, like we received a lot of interest from VCs like back when I spoke at the center stage of Web Summit, and we just were not ready to scale. But since I was receiving like all of that interest, I was like thinking, okay, maybe I should just take it now. And it was like the best thing that we could have done, because the progress and the foundations that we've laid since November have actually been like exactly what we needed for us to actually be able to scale confidently. So like we've already got like a repeatable sales process. We've already validated the customer acquisition channels. We've already built a product and iterated a lot based on the customer feedback. So now like we've already designed the processes within the company and kind of like the org chart of who we're going to hire for what, their roles and responsibilities. And now we're like super confident that not only we can hire, but that we need to hire to meet the demand of the companies that want to use our products.
That's interesting. So it's like having this. It's way better to have this like desperate need and like well thought out structural plan for who you're going to hire as opposed to just being like, well, we might as well have some more people and like teach them on the job or whatever, because I guess you're learning too. Exactly.
That way, you're just going to end up spending a lot of money and probably not the right way.
And are you kind of how important is team culture to you guys? Is that something that you're going to focus on as the team grows, or is it something you kind of have?
Nah, don't worry about it. It's not important to us at all.
It's basically windowless rooms,
Yeah.
lights on at 9 a.m. They're off again at 9 p.m. That's when you can leave.
Yeah.
Just grind it
No.
out.
Not at all. Culture is super, super important. And to be honest, maybe because I didn't have a lot of experience or because I was a technical founder, in the beginning, I actually neglected how important culture was. To be honest, shout out to the Venture City, our other investors, because they kind of coach us through the importance of having a strong culture, and not just having a strong culture, but actually having values that everyone at the company decides together. The founding team decides together, and then everyone that you hire needs to fit that culture, not only because they're going to also help shape the culture of the company, but because if you're misaligned in terms of culture, no, the saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And if you don't have a strong culture, you can do all the strategy that you want, but you're not going to have everyone rowing in the same direction.
That's a really good phrase that I haven't heard before.
What?
Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
It's
Nice.
not mine, actually. I don't know who said it, but it's a common saying, I guess.
I'm writing it down. That's why I'm not saying anything.
Culture eats strategy. Where are you writing it? What are you going to use? Just put it above your desk?
I don't work at a startup. I work at a creative studio. And our core value is culture. It's culture first. And it just makes everything way easier when it seems, it doesn't make working in day-to-day business easier. But then as soon as you're actually looking to grow, or the next phase, or what your strategy is, or how you're going to grow the team, or what you want to focus on, we always put culture first. And I think it's really cool. I think that's why I wrote it down, because I'm going to tell my team about it, because I think they'll like that. And then we'll probably put a big sign up somewhere.
That's a cool painting to have. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you for your time today. It's been really good to get some insights on specifically how you guys did it. Sounds like you had a rocky start, so it's good to see that you've done so well. And I actually saw you talk on the main stage at Web Summit, so just wanted to slide that in. Is there anything any shout outs you want to give to anyone out there, or anything you want to say to any potential collaborators?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much, Tim and Dan, for inviting me into this podcast. To be honest, it's the first podcast that I'm in, and it has been the best experience. You're both really cool guys. I really enjoyed this, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. And also, I didn't know that you saw me on the Web Summit Center stage. So it's really cool to know, first of all, that you liked it, hopefully. And second of all, that you're an early riser, because we were the first one.
Yeah.
Nice.
But regarding the shout out, so I guess I would have two major shout outs to do. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, we're raising our $3 million seed round. We've already got 1.25 million committed for the round. And basically, if you're an investor and you're interested in investing in a company that is defining a new category that's called reliability intelligence, that's going to be critical for most, if not all, cloud native companies, reach out to me to be a part of our journey. And if you're a cloud native company who's struggling with reliability, or simply you're scaling and you want to make sure that you maintain reliability, feel free to ping me to join our beta program, and we'll give you a nice discount if you use the Codesphere. No, I'm kidding. Just ping me.
Nice.